Mint is still $15 a month for premium wireless. And if you haven't made the switch yet, here are 15 reasons why you should. 1, it's $15 a month. 2, seriously, it's $15 a month. 3, no big contrast. 4, I use it. 5, my mom uses it. Are you playing me off? That's what's happening, right? Okay, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, $15 per month equivalent required. New customer offer first 3 months only. Then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Hey, Fidelity. What's it cost to invest with the Fidelity app?
Start with as little as $1 with no account fees or trade commissions on U.S. stocks and ETFs.
That's music to my ears.
I can only talk.
Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Zero account fees apply to retail brokerage accounts only. Sell order assessment fee not included. A limited number of ETFs are subject to a transaction-based service fee of $100. See full list at fidelity.com/commissions. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE, SIPC.
I know every operating system like the back of my hand.
I have 25 years of experience and have worked with several people from your company. I've been recognized for my passion. My team is everything.
LinkedIn delivers candidates who rise above the rest. With an up-to-date view into shared connections, skills, and interests you won't find anywhere else. See why 86% of small businesses who post a job on LinkedIn get a qualified candidate within a day. Post a job for free at linkedin.com/achieve. LinkedIn, your next great hire is here.
Immigration used to be something that united Canadians. Generally speaking, the Canadian public was in favor of immigration, even as numbers increased larger and larger by the year. Hello, welcome to the Full Comment Podcast. My name's Brian Lilly, your host, and this week we're going to take a look at where immigration is heading now because public support is falling. Even former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau once famously said, "We're bringing in people faster than we can absorb them." And the Liberals have done very little to change that. Over the past several weeks, Conservative MP and immigration critic Michelle Rempel Garner, MP for Calgary Nose Hill, has been taking the Liberals to task over abuses of the temporary foreign worker program. She joins me now to talk about that. Michelle, we'll make that our starting point. It's not the only issue in a system that used to run very well, that used to be studied by other countries around the world. Now, if they studied our program, they would be looking to say, how do we not mess this up? But what is the main issue with the temporary foreign workers program? Because Prime Minister Carney says it's working just fine. Employers want these people, and they've already reduced the numbers. So what say you?
A couple of things. I think it's worth pointing out right off the top, especially when you're talking about the polling numbers on public sentiment on immigration in Canada, that I actually think that Canadians still support the concept of immigration. Canada's not anti-newcomer. I think what's been really interesting for me to watch is that the Canadian public is opposed to the fact that the Liberals have mismanaged the system. They've brought in too many people too fast for the economic and social supports like jobs, housing, and healthcare to keep up. So I think it's a solvable problem. So, then to your question about the temporary foreign worker program. So in the last 10 years, the Liberals reversed the reforms that former Minister Jason Kenney made to the program in 2014 and then completely juiced the numbers. And then in the meantime, they did that while we're in the middle of a massive youth jobs crisis, while, our economy is teetering into recession. And so the economy is not creating jobs. And they're bringing in temporary foreign workers who are often abused in these programs to take jobs that should be going to Canadians. So the program needs to be scrapped. I don't see another alternative. We've talked about.
What about just putting the guardrails back on? And I'd like to mention some of those because you mentioned that Jason Kenney had put them on. And then in April of 2022, the Liberals got rid of them. Some of those included, if your local unemployment rate was above 6%, you couldn't get a labor market impact assessment to get a temporary foreign worker. They got rid of that. We've had immigration above 6% for 18 months in this country. They increased it as the maximum number you could have from 10% to 20%, and in some cases, 30% of your workforce could be temporary foreign workers. It just would seem like common sense to maybe put those back on. Why do you say scrap it instead of go back to the way it was?
Because there's a moral imperative associated with the program that's, I think, fundamentally anti-Canadian in two forms. First of all, the temporary foreign worker program has normalized the acceptability of a low-skilled, indentured foreign underclass to do certain types of work in this country. And I think that's morally wrong. It also...
Explain what you mean by indentured.
Okay, so for your listeners, for the most part, people coming into the program under the Temporary Foreign Worker Program are tied to one employer. They can't move around. And their ability to stay in the country is determinant on whether or not the employer keeps their job going. Like, it's oversimplified, but that's essentially what it is. So
as an employer, I could threaten you and say, Michelle,
100%.
You're not doing well, and if you don't smarten up, you're going to have to leave the country.
Or subject you to extremely poor working conditions. And that's the thing, Brian, like this, you've reported on stories about the program being rife with abuse of workers, right? Stories about workers who have actually paid to come to the country to get that permit, which is, the quote I use is a middle finger to Canadian labor law. But, what I mean about that normalization of an underclass is it's bankrupt from two perspectives. First of all, I saw some Liberal commentators this week going like, well, my friends and I don't want to do those jobs. Can you imagine if I said that? Because that's a dog whistly thing, right? There are certain
I did
jobs,
all those jobs.
Yeah, there are certain jobs that only certain people should do. The second thing that's wrong with the program is that it removes the concept that we should be betting on Canadian kids. I've said this many times over the last week. My first job was in an ice cream store in Winnipeg when I was 15 years old. And I learned, 16, I can't remember. I remember learning the basics of responsibility, showing to work up on time, customer service, working to standard, working to a timeline, a product consistency, like the basics of work, right? And so over the last decade, we've seen that first job really kind of disappear and the value and dignity of that first job disappear. And when employers say that there are Canadian youth that don't want to do those jobs, I don't buy it. I know that there are kids who would and gladly and with love do those jobs. I just think the program's anti-Canadian. There, I'll say it. Because also, if we want to invite people to this country, to invite them and say, okay, well, we expect you to work in jobs, but you're not going to have the same labor standards as other people who have come to this country to build a better life. No, it has to stop. Enough. It's over.
A lot of people just think of temporary foreign worker program being something that helps seasonal agricultural workers. That's not the program you're talking about, though. You're talking about the program that you've been posting. They couldn't possibly find someone to work at a Booster Juice or a Tim Hortons for $36 an hour. I'm simply not buying that. I've told every kid that would ever listen to me, if you can get a job at a McDonald's, and I haven't heard of McDonald's, abusing this program, but there are some others that people talk about a lot. But you get a job at a McDonald's, any employer is going to hire you on your next job. Why? Because you learned a system. So yeah, it's a low skill entry level job working as a line cook at McDonald's. But what you learn from learning their system will do you well in that next job. And it worked for me. It's worked for countless other kids that have advised that too, including my own.
He's a McDonald's. My chief of staff is a McDonald's alum, and he turned out all right.
There you go. But Restaurants Canada put out a statement the other day saying only 3% of the workforce of our members works for our temporary foreign workers, and there's not abuse in the program, and we need this. Mark Carney said, it's the number 2 issue he hears from employers. We need access to these people. It's number 2 after tariffs. What do you answer to Prime Minister Carney?
It's 3% too many in the middle of with a faltering economy, with all the moral issues we just talked about, and also with the technological disruptions created by AI. Brian, if any of the GR types that represent these people are listening to this clip, this is what I would say. There's a first mover advantage to a company coming out and saying, we are not using this program anymore. We're doing the morally right thing here. Because I honestly think the Liberals are going to have to abolish it. I can't see a lane out for them. But what they should be pivoting to is advocating for labor mobility strategies, skills training for youth, skills matching for youth. that's where the industry should be asking for. And also productivity increases, right? You have all these economists that come out and rightly clutch their pearls over, Canada's productivity, we're in a crisis. Well, how can you see productivity gains if Canadian industry has this unlimited access to indentured, temporary, low-cost labor? I mean, it's anti-market. Like, if we're just even talking from a conservative principle, right? So I don't buy it at all. I don't think anybody in the public really buys it either. You mentioned ag. The program was designed way back in the day, to fill legitimately hard to fill labor in natural, like areas of naturally and persistently low unemployment, like seasonal agriculture labor. And that needs still persists. And that's why we've echoed what farmers and food producers have told us and said, hive that off. Have a separate program for that need. The rest of this stuff needs to go. It needs to go.
Let's mention one of the companies that takes a big beating online, Tim Hortons, fairly or not, is getting beaten. Do you think it's fair, some of the online comments that the company is facing, that they only hire people who aren't from Canada?
So here's the thing. Nobody should be blaming the newcomers who want to come to Canada for coming to Canada and building a better life. Nobody should be doing that. That's completely unfair, and to me that's antithetical to what it means to be Canadian. But they sure should be blaming the Liberals for allowing companies like Tim Hortons to build a business model that relies not just on TFWs, but also on other streams of temporary foreign labor as well, too. If I was sitting on the Tim Hortons board, Brian, what I would say to them is, how did you not see this as a risk exposure, a long-term risk exposure? How did you allow if this is so, like, such a hill to die on for you, it must mean that there's a lot of risk associated with your profit and loss model. So this is a government intervention that clearly has problems. It also has, to your point about comments, it has brand problems too, right? Because if a company whose brand has been associated with the Canadian ethos for so long is using a program that the UN has likened to slave labor, like, how did nobody in their company say, maybe we shouldn't be heavily reliant on a program that the United Nations has likened to modern day slave labor? Hello.
Seems like a fair
free political advice, Tim Hortons. Free GR advice. Maybe don't do that.
Temporary foreign workers, as I said off the top, that's only part of the problem facing the immigration system. Still on the temporary resident side, we drove up the population of temporary residents in this country to 7.3% of the total population.
Yeah.
That's utterly insane. These are people that we've allowed in the country but expect them to leave.
Yep.
They've come as temporary foreign workers or as students, or the big one that few people talk about, but you have, the International Mobility Program. Explain this program to us, and is this one also problematic the way the TFW program is?
Yeah, it's so first of all, for people listening, and I've seen a lot of comments about this online, people think that the IMP, the International Mobility Program, it's like structured the same way as the TFW program, and it's not. It's more of like oversimplified, a catch-all for a bunch of different temporary immigration streams, right? So big ones being the foreign student permitting process, which when you get one of those, somebody would be allowed to work a certain amount of time. And then those permits, again, largely auto-convert into something called a postgraduate work permit. And that's where a lot of people are seeing these big gluts or big spikes in overall temporary foreign labor. So the difference between the TFW program and these programs, there are differences. But the big one is that it's kind of what's happening right now with those programs is that there's if you can imagine a snake that just ate a big mouse, it's like there's this bulge working its way through the system. And the bulge was Sean Fraser during his tenure as immigration minister, and he bragged about it. I've tweeted this clip a million times. I think it was close to 750,000 people that he allowed in through these various streams or more in a 2-year period. So what happens is that bulge is working its way through all of the processes under the IMP. And the Liberals are saying, okay, well, we've reduced numbers over here, but they haven't figured out what to do with the bulge, right? And so what's happening...
It's like a snake eating a pig whole.
Yeah, 100%. And so what's happening is, like, the Liberals and Sean Fraser, they sort of tacitly promised all the people that came in under those years that they sort of wink and a nod, like, don't worry, you'll be able to stay in Canada, right?
You'll get permanent residency.
But now what's happening is you see, protests, people saying, well, I want to stay here. I should be offered permanent residency. And the government doesn't have a plan to remove people who have overstayed their visa. So now they have this program.
And you've got several of them, many of them, saying, I won't leave.
And it's not their fault for being invited to this country and wanting to build a better life here.
Well, look, I can understand the desire, Michelle. My parents are immigrants. We sponsored my uncle's family to come over and join us. We've sponsored refugee families fleeing war and persecution. I get all that. But if you agree to come as a student, and you're going to be allowed into the country on a 2-year visa, you're expected to leave at the end of the 2-year visa. That would be the same if I went to the States or to the UK or
100%.
wherever.
But I think it's very important for Canadians to not point the finger. This is what the Liberals want Canadians to do. That's what they want me to do, is point the finger at newcomers. And it's not their fault for wanting to come here. I mean, you had Justin Trudeau tweet, #welcome to Canada in 2017 with the associated, let's just, anybody can come here. There's no rules. There's no fairness. There's no order. So of course there's going to be this expectation. And the other thing is too, Brian, is that there's this understanding that the asylum system in Canada has been, by the Liberals, transformed into a backdoor economic immigration
let's get to that
system.
in a moment, because I got the numbers.
And I'm just going to finish. So that's like the IMP, we're talking about that. So the question for the Liberals is fall, because they keep saying like, oh, okay, well, we're reducing numbers here. We're not letting new people in. But what people, when they see these graphs, they're seeing that bulge. So what happens with these people? What are the Liberals going to do with them?
Are they just going to get permanent residency?
Well, Brian, I did spend the entire summer, more than I like to spend some of my summer in Ottawa. But the Conservative Party has a very detailed policy platform that we've started to roll out. We will be rolling it out over the fall, that is going to present the Liberals with common sense solutions to these problems, to restore order and fairness to the immigration system, and to ensure that Canadians get Canadian jobs, but also to ensure that newcomers to Canada who want to come here and build a better life are done in that process is returned to order, sanity, fairness, and in numbers that the Canadian economy and our social fabric can continue. The levels that are at right now, they need to be way reduced, right? So
on every single stream, Michelle, whether we're talking temporary foreign workers, IMP, asylum seekers, permanent residency, they are still way above.
They are 100%.
Where they were just 5 years ago. They've said that they're going to reduce permanent residents down to 400,000 or just under 400,000. Well, that's still well above the Harper era average of about 250,000. It ranged between about 210 to 290 in the Harper years, averaging about 250. They're saying, we'll decrease it from 500,000 to 395.
Exactly.
That is still a massive number.
Crazy.
When you've still got all these other big streams.
100%. And I have been watching this, and I know it's in their QP binders. This is the play that they're going to say is exactly that. Well, we've lowered levels, but it's like saying, we put out the fire. Hint, they didn't put out the fire, and then what's left is this burnt out house, right? And they're like, oh, look, we put out the fire. But it's like, well, what happened to the house, right? And so it's the conversation about immigration now, given how badly the Liberals mismanage the system, yes, it has to be about levels going forward. And I've got a lot to say about that. But it also has to be about, okay, you have, 4 or 5 million people in the country, like overall, that are on some form of visitor visa, that their visitor visa is about to expire. What's the plan, boys and girls? How are you going to get them to leave? And then what does that mean for levels going forward? And that's what we started litigating in the House in May. But boy, oh boy, there's a lot more coming next week.
Well, we're at the point where we've gone from strong support for immigration, and I know you said earlier you still think Canadians support it, but they want order.
Not
but
like this, though. Not like
So
what the rules have
chaotic
done.
right now that a Nanos poll released to the Globe and Mail this past week said 71.4% agree with reducing the number of new immigrants, 65.5% agree with reducing the target for new temporary residents. I'll throw some quick numbers out at you, and let's chat about the abuse of the asylum system. Because I've been down to Peter Street here in Toronto, which is a welcoming center where people literally get off the plane at Pearson and are shuttled downtown to a shelter system where they can't get a shelter bed. At one point earlier this year, Toronto, over the last decade, increased the number of shelter beds from about 5,000, just shy of 5,000, to 10,000. And still, earlier this year, 60% of our shelter beds were filled with asylum seekers. Why is that? That was never a huge problem before, because the asylum system's being abused. 2015, it was 16,000 people claimed asylum in Canada. Last year, 190,000, and there's almost 300,000 waiting for their hearing still.
Exactly.
This is backdoor economic migration.
It is. There was a great article in The Economist a couple of months ago, and this is The Economist. It's not like a bastion of conservative thought talking about the abuse of asylum systems in Western countries writ large. But I think that there's no greater example than Canada right now. So to your point, when the Liberals took government, there was a backlog of less than 10,000 people in the asylum system. There is now 300,000 people over. What happened? #Welcome to Canada, 2017. But it started earlier than that too. The Liberals lifted the visa requirement on Mexico without having a plan to put in place or to stop bogus asylum claimants. That saw an uptick in numbers. But then the minute that Justin Trudeau rolled the red carpet out for people illegally crossing the border from upstate to New York into Canada, and then called me, I was the immigration critic at the time, essentially implied that I was a racist for saying that the Safe Third Country Agreement should be strengthened. They had to do it again later. It normalized people crossing into the country, claiming asylum. And then here's the kicker, Brian. It takes about 4 years for an asylum claim to be processed in many circumstances, right? And during that time, people, regardless if their claim is valid or not, they have access to, the Liberals have spent over $2 billion on hotels and food and shelter for asylum claimants, provincial benefits.
The city of Toronto has a budget hole of $100 million. It's
crazy.
This year. And $100 million because of the costs of housing people through this.
And that's not fair. It's not fair to people who have legitimate asylum claims, who are waiting for years in the system, who are actually fleeing persecution. It's not fair to the people who are waiting abroad through privately sponsored refugee streams that are in refugee camps that are genocide survivors, like the Yazidi community that I've been working with for years. And it's not fair to Canadians who have their social services abused by people who do not have valid asylum claims, right? So healthcare. It's bananas.
You mentioned the Yazidis. I remember Jason Kenney, when he was minister, bringing in the Karens from Burma. You can think of, the great effort for bringing in Syrian refugees fleeing that war, or Vietnam fleeing that war. And now our number one claim for asylum seekers becomes India, followed by Mexico.
Look.
I'm sorry. Those are not valid claims, and we should not be accepting them. The government finally put back in some, but not all of the visa requirements for Mexico, and numbers fell by half. But they need to go down further.
After I told them so 10 years ago, but I digress.
Yeah. But, I mean, this is making a mockery of a system that's supposed to be there to help people. If you want to be an economic migrant, get in line. Follow the rules.
Exactly.
I mean, I encourage that. That is what my family did. That is what everyone in my neighborhood growing up did.
And that's the Liberals. Why can't they just say that? Follow the rules. When they say that, it's fair. And you restore order, you're acknowledging that there are people who want to come to this country and play by the rules, right? So, I just want to say something very quickly. There is a difference between a refugee and an asylum seeker. A refugee under Canadian law is somebody is somebody who's been selected to come to Canada, and their claim has already been approved by the Canadian government before they come to Canada, from refugee camps through the privately sponsored refugee process. Asylum claimants are people who have somehow had the privilege and fortune of making it to Canada and then claim asylum, okay? So That 300,000 number, these are people who have made it to Canada, many of which who have illegally crossed the border from upstate New York into the US, claimed asylum, and are sitting here waiting for their claim to be heard. They have appeals processes. Sometimes it can take years and years to get to the final end of this process. And then oftentimes there's difficulties in removing them from the country. And knowing that that process takes so long and that they can receive benefits through it, it incents the abuse of the system. Oh, they also get work permits too, right? So I'm not saying all asylum seekers are bogus. There are legitimate people who, but there's a lot who are. There's a lot of bogus asylum claimants, and we need to have some courage to say that. Like, the system's broken.
You can go online and find the ways that people are coached to come here. And it was happening during Roxham Road. It's happening since. I've got a friend whose son works at the airport, and they hear the same story over and over again on just about every international flight that they deal with coming in. Why do they get told the same stories? Because that's what people are coached to say. If you say this, they have to take you in Canada. And unfortunately, as I said, an abuse of the system. You mentioned deportations. We have to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to ask you about that, because we can't seem to deport criminals, never mind anybody else. So will there be a plan with more than 1 million visas expiring? Back in moments.
As a sports fan, I have to confess, sometimes the game gets kind of boring. That's when I unfold my Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 7 and use multi-window viewing on its large screen. Boring game? I'm checking out my fantasy baseball league at the same time. Score still 1-0? I'm replying to emails in the other window, scoring points with the boss. Semifinals finally getting exciting? I'm buying tickets to the finals and booking my flights. Can your phone do that?
The new Galaxy Z Fold 7. Get yours at Samsung.com.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. When you visit the doctor, you probably hand over your insurance, your ID, and contact details. It's just one of the many places that has your personal info. And if any of them accidentally expose it, you could be at risk for identity theft. LifeLock monitors millions of data points a second. If you become a victim, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year at lifelock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
This episode is brought to you by Chevrolet. Chevy certified service technicians are factory trained to fit your vehicle with the tires specifically developed for it. And with our tire price match guarantee, you get the best fit for the best deal. Let us do the work. Available on select eligible tire brands at participating dealers only. Offer ends 12/31/2025. Terms apply. See dealer for complete details. Visit Chevrolet.com/service to learn more.
This is Tristan Hopper, the host of Canada Did What?, where we unpack the biggest, weirdest, and wildest political moments in Canadian history you thought you knew until you what really happened. Stick around at the end of the episode to hear a sample of one of our favorite episodes. If you don't want to stick around, make sure you subscribe to Canada Did What? Everywhere you get podcasts.
Just to reiterate, by the end of this year, nearly 5 million people will be in Canada with expired or expiring visas, and the government has no plan on how they're going to get them to leave. We have a housing crisis, a youth jobs crisis, healthcare wait time crisis. And knowing this, the Liberals have already issued nearly 177,000 new temporary foreign work permits this year, a 10% increase from the last quarter. That's the same amount of people as Kelowna. Well, with a youth unemployment crisis, why did the government increase the number of temporary work permits this year?
The Honourable Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship.
Mr. Speaker, we take our immigration system very seriously on this side of the aisle, as I know all Canadians do. And for that reason, we are strengthening the integrity of our system while maintaining the humanitarian ability that we have in this country. Make no mistake, Canada takes its obligations seriously, and we are strengthening our asylum system to make it more efficient and more efficient and flexible. And we will be doing exactly that.
That was the notorious MRG grilling Mark Carney's immigration minister earlier. Will we see more of that? MRG, by the way, Michelle Rempel Garner, our guest on the program today. More than 1 million visas expiring and no plan for removing people. Look, I don't think anyone in Canada wants to see what's going on with ICE in the U.S. right now? Well, maybe some do, but I don't think that's what people are looking for. But what are the chances that we can remove people or even encourage people to leave when we have tens of thousands of wanted criminals in this country who we have lost track of? That's Canada Border Services Agency puts that out every year. The number is always between 25 and 30,000 that they've just lost.
So where to even start on this? Yes, of course, the Liberals need a plan to ensure that people who do not have a legal right in the country leave. I mean, that's the whole point of a temporary visa. You come, you leave. It's why we have a visa approval process. People are rejected based on whether or not the government thinks that they're going to leave or not. So I think that there are several ways that the Liberals can incent people to leave on time. Our party leader and myself will have more to say about that in coming weeks. But the fact that they can't answer that question, it talks to the ethos of the Liberal government when it comes to immigration. I honestly don't they don't think about this. They, especially Sean Fraser, with that glut we were talking about earlier of people that he invited to Canada through temporary student visas and kind of said, hey, wink and a nod, don't worry, you're going to be able to stay here. And it's like,
yeah, but I mean, this is Sean Fraser. This is the guy that says defending yourself in your own home is the Wild West, as opposed to clearly established Canadian common law.
Sean, he's a nice guy, but he really sucks as a cabinet minister, Brian. Some performance issue there, hey? So yeah, and the thing I'll mention too about that was that the numbers of people that he brought into the country, he was warned by his department, and he said this is too much, too fast, and he did it anyways. So it is going to be a topic of debate in the House. I can guarantee. Well, I know it will be because I'll be involved in it on how the government is going to get people to leave who don't have a legal right to be in the country.
Do you think that they will have anything to respond with? And I'm talking about the people whose visas are expired, not criminals, just people whose visas have expired, they haven't left. Do you have any reason to believe that they will have an answer beyond racist?
Well, they need to. I mean, you talked about Canadians.
I'm not sure, because the previous government, this new guy we're told will deliver. The previous government wasn't really into delivering.
I don't think Mark Carney's into delivering either, but I digress. I mean,
well, I'm starting to get that after the major projects announcement.
List. Yes, exactly.
But I mean, that has been their go-to for years, is just if you want any changes to the immigration system that aren't bringing more people faster, that you're racist. If you want an orderly system that works, as it did under Liberal and Conservative governments for years, then you are somehow racist. Will they just fall back on that, or will they come up with a plan that doesn't just involve saying, okay, well, you're all permanent residents now, so stay?
But when people talk about the word Canadian, there's an implication of diversity in that. So when I say, when you coming to Canada is a privilege, it's not a right, and there are responsibilities associated with that privilege, including if you come to Canada on a temporary visa, you have to leave when your visa expires, right? So that's what the law says. That's what the law has said for years across different stripes and flavors of government. So you talked about those numbers, the polling numbers about people's perception of immigration and desire of immigration. If Canadians think that the system is so broken that people just come to the country and never have to leave or don't have to follow the rules, then of course there's not going to be a support for the broken immigration system. So Conservatives are going to, it's not the immigrants' fault, it is the Liberals' fault for breaking the system, and Conservatives are going to restore order to that this fall from the opposition benches. I promise you, we are going to be pushing on these issues.
You think that there will be enough public pressure that they will have to do something?
I don't think that this is an issue that's contained to one partisan stripe. The fact that David Eby came out, NDP Premier David Eby came out and said the temporary foreign worker program needs to be scrapped. I think that there's a growing consensus across partisan stripe that the broken immigration system, the fact that the Liberals have broke it, is what has caused that decline in support for Canada's, immigration consensus.
Youth
and so
unemployment.
the imperative has to be to fix it. I don't see the NDP proposing fixes right now. I hope they will. Open invitation. But we are going to be proposing fixes that are common sense, that support Canadians, and also, support the principle of people who want to come to Canada by playing by the rules to build a better life. It has to be done in an orderly way, in numbers that are not what the Liberals have put forward in the past.
Premier Eby came out in support of that after you and Pierre Poilievre made statements about the temporary foreign worker program being broken, and after the new jobs report showed that youth unemployment in his province had gone up to almost 13%. I think it went up from 12.1 to 12.9%. Next door to BC, in your home province, youth unemployment dropped last month from 20% to 17%, but not because more youth got jobs, but because more youth stopped looking for work. Same thing in Ontario, where I think youth unemployment is about 15, 16%. These are big, massive problems that you've got to deal with. As you say, you're encouraging an indentured underclass by bringing people in to do these jobs, but you're also keeping young people that are already here from the workforce. That's going to have long-term implications if you don't fix it.
100%. Like you nailed it. If you think about what happens if kids can't get jobs through their early or late teen years, early formative years in their 20s when they're going to college, that is a lack of skill set. It's like, shutting the schools down in the pandemic for 2 years, right? These kids didn't get the benefit of in-class time, of socialization, of in-person learning. If you don't get that hands-on job experience, if you don't have that first job, how are you going to get the experience you need to move up or learn how to start a business, right? And when you think about technological disruption right now, we're essentially, by having an out of whack immigration system, we're incenting a long-term problem with the domestic labor force. But it's not just the immigration system, Brian. It's also the fact that the economy is not creating jobs right now. So the Liberals need to understand that they have been using immigration numbers to artificially, inflate Canada's overall GDP numbers. They've been sort of hiding the fact that our economy has been in slowdown for some time. But these programs have depressed wages. They've taken opportunities from Canadians. And also, I think it's worth noting that some Canadians who are here on some types of temporary work visas, like foreign student permits, they can't find work either. So then you have these stories of these kids who are invited to Canada to study, and they end up sleeping under bridges. Toronto, there was a really terrible story in Toronto. I think it was a couple years ago. It might have even been your story about Peel area property listings. Like basically, I think it was saying like trading sex services for rent or something like that.
I don't remember that one. I do remember. I believe it was 25 people.
Yes,
in one home.
I've seen all of these stories, and I'm just like, okay, something is wrong here. So yeah, obviously the numbers have been out of whack, and there needs to be way less people so that immigration matches housing, healthcare, and jobs again. And right now that number we're way out of whack. It's not aligning with those macroeconomic factors.
Okay, we've got a few minutes left. I want to ask you about the economic factors. It's not your file, but you're an experienced politician. You're a smart woman. You can have views beyond immigration. Let's talk about how the Carney government is or isn't delivering. They had their big major projects announcement last week. No oil pipeline on it. But my initial assessment was, beyond the fact that there's no oil pipeline on there, and I think there needs to be, the projects that were there were projects that were already going to be moving forward, and they're not overly ambitious. So like the twinning of Canada LNG up to Kitimat, the expansion of small modular reactors at Darlington in Ontario, the expansion of the Port of Montreal, these were all things that were going to be happening. So where is this? We need to think bigger. We need to think big and act bigger and move at speeds we've never seen before. This is a slow crawl of baby steps.
I woke up this morning and I read the announcement, and you know what came to mind? Do you know that meme of like the charcoal horse that starts with like really detailed in the back and it turns into like a stick figure in the front? And I'm thinking what Mark Carney promised with the major projects list versus what he delivered, right? He promised all these grand things, and it turned out to be like a stick figure of projects that they're important, but they've already been approved. They're already in the can. Where is the full nation-building projects that, Mark Carney elbows up during the campaign. Where are they? Where's the pipeline? Where's the grid infrastructure?
He's got a second list of projects that he says will come down the road, but they're not ready yet. Well, those are the ones you should be pushing. The hydroelectric, or not hydroelectric, but the wind farm project, the offshore wind farm project that Tim Houston's pushing in Nova Scotia. I've talked to Premier Houston about that. That could be a major project. He's just, down the road we'll do that. Or, my favorite is that they've put this on there as a major nation-building project for the economy, high-speed rail between Toronto and Quebec City. How does that help people in Calgary, Nose Hill?
So this is how I would respond. The Liberals can't build things. Fight me. Like, what have they built? They certainly haven't signaled anything that they're going to build. And I mean, you want to talk about Calgary Nose Hill? Here's my therapeutic rant, Brian Lilly. In 2015, before we lost government, Jason Kenney and I announced $1.5 billion to build an LRT in Calgary, the infamous Green Line. And then it went from stretching all the way across the city to being 4 times the cost and 4 times less track, and it hasn't been built. And it's $500 million plus has been spent. This is what you get from liberal flavors of government at all different stripes, but certainly the federal government has no idea how to build things, like from procurement of military stuff to major projects. So, when I saw this morning, that's why to me it just reduced into a meme, because it's like they are a meme. They're a meme on this stuff. He comes out and he's like, oh yeah, we're going to build these projects. It's like, well, I thought he was the CEO of a big, successful company. Is this how he managed Brookfield? Like, where's the deal flow for Canadians, Mark? If Brookfield's board was looking at this stuff, and the promise that he was supposed to deliver was big, bold projects that are going to build the Canadian economy. Well, where's the moonshot that we were promised? Where's my pipeline? I think the Canadians should have righteous anger on this, because they were sold a bill of goods with this guy. And this list, it just proves it, right? And to finish my therapeutic rant, that they're creating this bureaucracy, the Major Projects Office. Oh, yes. That's what we need, is another office filled with bureaucrats that are going to further make it harder and put more red tape up for projects getting built.
So let me ask you about
lots
the pipeline.
to talk about this fall.
So because I have issues with this list, as I said, well beyond the pipeline. Don't tell me that, essentially they're, pissing on my leg and tell me it's raining when they say these are big nation-building projects.
They're
not.
Top line.
They need to be done. But an oil pipeline should be a no-brainer. And their response is, but no company is proposing it.
Yeah, well,
why would that be? I was sitting with Alberta Premier Danielle Smith last week at Canada Strong and Free Network event in Calgary, and she was blunt. She said, what company is going to step forward when the regulatory environment remains the same, that you cannot build, that you cannot expand production, that you cannot do anything? Of course they're not going to. So shouldn't he be saying, let's change the regulatory environment?
My girl Danielle, spot on. Yes, of course. And this is business basics 101. If you and I were charged with coming up, let's say we were running a company, and it's like, okay, well, this project, it could deliver, a lot of profit and jobs and benefits over a set period of time. But you look at the regulatory environment, it's like, this is never going to get built because of a lack of political will, a slow and onerous and pedantic and unclear regulatory process, like the Liberals put in place with the No More Pipelines bill, the anti-tanker bill. Of course, nobody's going to, of course. Well, there's no proponent. It's a chicken and the egg argument. It's a logical fallacy. Nobody is going to build this unless the government gets out of the way. The government needs to get out of the way. Let business do these things. We can have all the environmental reviews, all the consultations, all of our duties to consult, check. We can do that. But today they signaled, no, we're not going to do that. So of course there's not going to be a proponent. Danielle's right. She's 100% right on this. Anyway.
Okay, I'll ask you one last question.
You fired me up this morning, Brian Lilly. I'm getting ready for the House in the fall.
Well, one more question as the House resumes, and that is, do you change the way you approach things like question period? And I'll ask in this context. I remember talking to a very smart political operative before Justin Trudeau resigned, and they said, you can't hit Justin Trudeau hard enough right now. You can hit him as hard as you want, and the public loves it. And they were worried at that point that, Trudeau might resign and someone like Melanie Joly would go in and, you can't treat her the same way you did Trudeau. Well, it's a new guy, and in some ways, but not really, a new government. How do you approach it with a different view and tone? Because Canadians were fed up with Trudeau. They're not yet fed up with this guy, but they want results. So how do you approach it? What do you do that's going to be different than what you did before?
Well, we started by outlining our priorities, right? So Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre came out this week with a open letter to the government on what our priorities are. It's basically like, get ready for QP. Here's what we're going to be focusing on. And those 4 priority areas distill down into what we are hearing from the country are areas that the government is not offering solutions to the public on. So obviously, economy, cost of living, affordability, housing, crime, and immigration. So, as much as I spent the summer putting together a set of policy proposals to hold the Liberals to account, I've announced 2 of them, a bill on preventing the judiciary from considering immigration status and sentencing violent criminals or serious criminals.
We didn't even talk about that. That's another
we started the TFW. I've got a whole kitty of stuff. My colleagues have been working all summer. Pierre's been working so hard. Poor guy. He's had a cold all summer. He's worked super hard. But we're going into the fall with a set of constructive policies that are going to offer common sense solutions to the country. And like Pierre's been saying this over and over again, steal these ideas. Take them. Please take them. Here, we're doing your job for you, Liberals, who have tens of thousands of bureaucrats. And I have my, trusty team of 5 staff. Shout out to them. But we're going to offer solutions. And we've always been doing that. But if the Liberals don't play ball with us on it, it's not just to their political detriment, it's to the detriment of the entire country. And that's what we're going to be pointing out. This is common sense stuff. Like the TFW program is common sense. The judiciary thing is common sense. Pierre announced bail reform today. We have a bail reform bill. They haven't put forward a bail reform bill that makes sense in years and years and years. We're going to be tabling that. A housing plan, right? So I hope they take those ideas.
It is going to be fascinating to watch, and I'm sure the audience will love getting their fill of the notorious MRG in the House. Michelle Rempel Garner, thanks so much.
Always a pleasure, Brian.
Full Comment is a post-media podcast. My name's Brian Lilly, your host. This episode was produced by Andre Proulx, theme music by Bryce Hall. Kevin Libin is the executive producer. Make sure you hit subscribe anywhere that you listen to your podcast. Help us out by leaving us a review or a rating. Thanks for listening. Until next time, I'm Brian Lilly.
Here's that clip from Canada Did What? I promised you. Castro would end up occupying a space in the Trudeau family similar to that of a beloved uncle. They went diving. They smoked cigars together. They gathered sea urchins for beach cookouts.
Informal talks at an island hideaway intensified their respect for each other, and their mutual enjoyment of skin diving added to the rapport.
In addition to a well-publicized 1976 summit meeting, Trudeau took 3 separate vacations to visit Castro after his time in politics had ended.
I can make, just one reference to Pierre Trudeau's sons to show the closeness of the relationship. The nickname that the Trudeau sons had for Fidel Castro was Papa Fidel. So that gives you an indication of the closeness of the bond that existed between a communist dictator, thorn in the side of every American administration for the past 50 years, and Pierre Trudeau.
When Trudeau's youngest son, Michel, died in an avalanche in 1998, Castro called the family in tears to express his condolences. As an 8-year-old, Michel had referred to Fidel Castro as his best friend. When Pierre died, Fidel declared 3 days of mourning in Cuba and flew to Montreal to act as an honorary pallbearer.
Every time Trudeau went down to Cuba, all the people in South Florida, the exiles, were thinking, why is this Western leader giving comfort to a murderous dictator, who is oppressing their people in Cuba, and saying, good things about Fidel Castro. And as I've mentioned, to have him in the pew at Trudeau's funeral, in the front row, as a dignified person, when he had been such a brutal leader, says more about Pierre Trudeau than it does about Fidel Castro.
Here's where we should probably touch on what Castro had done and what he was continuing to do while going on beach vacations with the Trudeau family.
If you want to hear the rest of the story, make sure you subscribe to Canada Did What everywhere you get your podcasts.